There's a verse in the Bible most people read, but never truly hear. Not because it's hidden, because if you understood what it was actually saying, it would completely change the way you see pain, loneliness, and the war inside your own mind. Depression doesn't always look like darkness. Sometimes it looks like smiling while you're exhausted, answering "I'm fine" when your soul feels numb, waking up tired even after sleeping for hours. And the terrifying part? The longer it lasts, the more you start believing this version of you is permanent. But Maya Angelou once said that words are things. They enter the walls of your mind and stay there, which means the wrong words can slowly destroy a person, but the right words can pull them back from the edge. There's one Bible verse that has done exactly that for millions. Not because it sounds beautiful, but because it exposes the lie depression wants you to believe. And when you finally understand the deeper meaning behind it, you realize something shocking. Your mind may be wounded, but your spirit was never defeated. So before you accept the sadness as your identity, listen carefully to the verse most people completely overlook. The terrifying thing about depression is that it doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a slow fading. You stop laughing the way you used to. You stop calling people back. You stare at the ceiling longer at night, and little by little, life begins to feel distant, as if you're watching everyone else live from behind invisible glass. That's why this Bible verse is so dangerous to depression, because depression survives by convincing you of one thing: you've been abandoned. Abandoned by people, abandoned by purpose, maybe even abandoned by God. But the verse hidden in plain sight says something completely different. It whispers a truth most broken people never notice while they're suffering. Even in your lowest moment, you were never carrying yourself alone. Maya Angelou once said that survival is important, but learning to survive with passion is transformative. And that's the part depression fears most, not your happiness, your awakening. Because when a person realizes they are still being guided through the darkness, something changes psychologically. The pain may still exist, the exhaustion may still exist, but hopelessness begins to crack. And once hopelessness cracks, depression loses its strongest weapon. But here's the deeper question nobody asks. If you were never truly abandoned, then why did the darkness work so hard to convince you that you were? One of the darkest things depression can do is erase a person without killing them. Not physically, psychologically. You still wake up, you still go to work, you still answer messages with "I'm okay," but deep inside, something begins disappearing. Your identity. The person who once dreamed boldly fades. The confidence you once carried weakens. Even your reflection starts to feel unfamiliar, like you're looking at someone you used to know. And this is where the hidden Bible verse becomes powerful in a way most people miss. Because the verse was never just about comfort. It was about remembrance. Depression attacks memory, not the memory of events, the memory of who you are. It convinces people they are weak because they are tired, broken because they are struggling, unworthy because they are hurting. But Maya Angelou understood something profound about human survival. When people lose hope, they first lose the story they tell themselves about their own life. That's why words matter so much, because identity is built through repeated language. And the verse quietly interrupts the destructive voice inside the mind, not with noise, not with shame, but with truth. A truth that says your suffering is not your identity. Your exhaustion is not your identity. Your depression is not the final version of you. But here's the unsettling part. If people have repeated painful lies to themselves for years, what happens the moment they finally hear a truth powerful enough to replace them? The human mind believes whatever it hears the most. That's the real danger, not just the pain, not just the loneliness, but the constant repetition of invisible words whispered inside your own head every single day. You're not enough. You'll never change. No one really understands you. And after hearing those thoughts long enough, the brain stops questioning them. It accepts them as truth. This is why Maya Angelou warned people about the power of words. Because words do not disappear after they are spoken. They echo, they settle into the subconscious, and eventually they shape identity. Depression understands this psychology perfectly. It doesn't destroy people all at once. It slowly trains them to speak against themselves, to narrate their own life through hopelessness. And the terrifying part is that most people don't even realize it's happening. That's why the Bible verse hidden at the center of this message is so powerful, because it interrupts the mental pattern, not with motivation, not with empty positivity, but with a deeper truth powerful enough to confront the inner voice that has been poisoning the mind for years. A single verse, repeated enough times, believed deeply enough, can begin rebuilding what depression tried to erase. Because healing often begins with one dangerous moment, the moment a person stops agreeing with the darkness inside them. And maybe that's why so many people avoid this verse completely. Because if they truly believed its message, they could never see themselves the same way again. The most painful battles are the ones nobody can see. A person can sit in a crowded room, smiling, talking, laughing, while internally fighting a war so heavy it feels impossible to explain. And over time, that silence becomes dangerous, because pain grows in isolation. The human mind was never designed to carry darkness alone. Yet depression convinces people to withdraw from the very connection that could begin healing them. They stop opening up, stop asking for help, stop believing anyone would understand. And this is where the hidden meaning behind the Bible verse becomes almost unsettling, because the verse is not just spiritual, it's psychological. It reveals that isolation changes the voice inside your mind. The longer a person suffers alone, the louder hopelessness becomes. Thoughts become distorted. Fear becomes identity. And eventually the silence itself starts speaking. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." That line cuts deep because depression often traps people inside stories they never speak aloud. Stories of failure, rejection, shame, emptiness. But the verse challenges that silence directly. It reminds people that darkness becomes strongest when it remains hidden. And maybe that's why healing begins the moment truth is spoken out loud. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough to break isolation's grip on the mind. Because once a person realizes they are not alone in their suffering, something dangerous happens to depression. It loses the secrecy that kept it alive. And what if that secrecy was the real prison all along? Some people don't want to heal because pain has become familiar. That's the hidden tragedy of depression. After carrying sadness long enough, the human mind begins adapting to it. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because suffering becomes predictable, safe. Even identity starts wrapping itself around the pain. And this is why so many people secretly stop believing their life can change. They still pray, still hope, still watch motivational videos late at night, searching for something to feel. But deep down, there's a quieter thought they never admit out loud. What if nothing works for me? That thought is dangerous, because once a person believes they are beyond saving, depression no longer has to fight them. The battle is already won internally. But the Bible verse hidden at the center of this message destroys that lie completely, because the verse was never written for perfect people. It was written for exhausted people, for wounded people, for people who feel emotionally trapped inside their own minds. Maya Angelou once said that every storm runs out of rain, and maybe that's what depression fears most. The realization that emotional darkness feels permanent only while you are standing inside it. The verse challenges the deepest illusion depression creates, that your future must look exactly like your past. But healing begins the moment a person questions that belief, the moment they wonder, what if my pain has been speaking louder than the truth? And maybe that question alone is powerful enough to begin changing everything. Depression is built on repetition, the same thoughts, the same fears, the same emotional weight replaying every morning before your feet even touch the floor. And the longer that cycle continues, the more permanent it feels. That's how hopelessness is created psychologically, not in one catastrophic moment, but through quiet repetition over time. A person wakes up exhausted for weeks, then months. They start expecting disappointment, expecting loneliness, expecting emptiness. Eventually, the brain stops searching for possibility because it has been trained to predict pain. But this is where the hidden Bible verse becomes more powerful than most people realize, because the verse interrupts repetition with a different pattern, a spiritual pattern, a mental pattern, a new internal language repeated often enough to challenge the emotional conditioning depression created. Maya Angelou understood this deeply when she spoke about surviving with intention rather than surrendering to suffering. Because what we repeatedly hear becomes what we emotionally believe, and depression knows this. That's why it keeps feeding the mind the same destructive narrative over and over until the person mistakes familiarity for truth. But imagine what happens when a different voice enters the cycle, a voice speaking strength instead of defeat, hope instead of fear, purpose instead of emptiness. At first, the mind resists it, because healing feels unfamiliar to someone who has lived inside darkness too long. But eventually, repetition begins working in the opposite direction, and maybe that's the secret nobody talks about. The mind that was trained into hopelessness can also be trained out of it. Most people think the goal is to escape suffering, but what if the deeper purpose of suffering is revelation? Some of the strongest people in history were not people who avoided pain. They were people who discovered something inside themselves that pain could not destroy. And that changes everything, because depression wants you to believe your struggle is proof of weakness. The Bible verse hidden at the center of this message says the opposite. It suggests that surviving darkness may reveal a strength you never would have discovered in comfort. That's why so many broken people eventually become powerful communicators, healers, leaders, and survivors. Not because pain made them special, but because pain forced them to confront themselves honestly. Maya Angelou carried enormous suffering throughout her life. Silence, trauma, loss. Yet somehow she transformed pain into wisdom, powerful enough to heal millions of people she would never even meet. And maybe that's the mystery hidden inside suffering. The very thing trying to break you may also be revealing who you truly are. Because when everything external is stripped away, validation, certainty, control, comfort, a person finally meets the deepest part of themselves. The part untouched by fear, untouched by failure, untouched by depression. And that realization terrifies darkness. Because once someone discovers that their spirit survived everything designed to destroy it, they stop seeing themselves as powerless. But here's the question that changes the entire meaning of pain. What if your suffering was never evidence that God abandoned you? What if it was evidence that something stronger was being built inside you the entire time? Depression survives by making people forget who they are. It whispers that the pain will never end, that the exhaustion is permanent, that the darkness inside your mind is the real version of you. But the secret hidden inside that Bible verse destroys the entire illusion, because the verse was never meant to simply comfort broken people. It was meant to wake them up, to remind them that feelings are powerful, but they are not always truthful, that suffering can distort identity, that isolation can distort perception, and that the human spirit is far stronger than the voice trying to bury it. Maya Angelou understood this deeply. She knew survival was not just about staying alive physically. It was about refusing to let pain define the meaning of your existence. And maybe that is the real battle against depression, not just escaping sadness, but protecting the story you believe about yourself. Because the moment a person truly believes they still carry purpose, even in their brokenness, something shifts psychologically. The darkness loses authority. The hopelessness loses certainty. And the mind begins opening to the possibility that healing was never as far away as it seemed. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one question. If the voice inside your mind has been lying to you this entire time, what else about yourself have you forgotten?